The chill of the late afternoon air clung to the damp practice bibs, smelling of earth and effort. He knelt, almost reverently, untying the laces of his worn boots, the silence around him a stark contrast to the boisterous echoes fading from the main pitch. A shadow fell over him, long and unwelcome in the fading light. Still playing with those antiques, quiet boy? Some of us are actually trying to get noticed, not just blend in with the grass. The voice was slick with the casual cruelty of youth. A smirk implied even if unseen, the words a familiar pebble thrown into his calm pond. He didn't look up, just continued his task, fingers moving with a practiced, unhurried rhythm. A faint tightening around his mouth, a barely perceptible pause in his breath, was the only betrayal of the barb's landing. This quiet ritual, this small space he carved out for himself at the edge of the team's boisterous energy, always seemed to invite their particular brand of attention. The other boy scoffed, a puff of breath in the cold, then swaggered off, rejoining the louder laughter drifting from the changing rooms, leaving a wake of disdain. He remained, a solitary figure, the weight of unspoken words settling heavier than the gathering dusk. An observer might have seen only a boy tending to his shoes. A closer look might have revealed the first subtle tremors of a strength yet uncoiled, a quiet resilience hardening under a veneer of passivity. The training ground was a patchwork of greens, some vibrant, some worn thin by the constant thud of ambition. It wasn't a gleaming, state-of-the-art facility, but rather a humble crucible where local dreams were forged and, sometimes, fractured. Here, amidst the scent of liniment and the rhythmic shouts of the coach, he moved like a whisper. His name was rarely called with emphasis, not because he lacked skill, far from it, but because his contributions were often understated, a subtle pass threaded through a needle eye of defenders, a quiet interception that snuffed out danger before it truly ignited. He possessed a fluid grace, an intuitive understanding of the game's geometry that belied his years, but he wore his talent like a comfortable old coat, not a dazzling new uniform. While others preened after a flashy dribble or a speculative long shot that occasionally found its mark, he would simply reset, his gaze already scanning for the next phase of play, his satisfaction internal, private. He was the boy who arrived early, not to impress, but to feel the dew on the grass, to have a few moments alone with the ball, a familiar friend. He was the one who stayed late, meticulously collecting stray cones and markers, not out of obligation, but from an ingrained sense of order and respect for the shared space. This quiet diligence, this lack of overt self-promotion, was a language his more boisterous teammates seemed unable or unwilling to comprehend. Chief among them was a boy with a swagger that outpaced his current abilities, a striker whose every goal, however scrappy, was celebrated with a pre-rehearsed flourish. Let's call him the captain of confidence, though his armband belonged to another. He and his loyal chorus saw the quiet boy's humility not as a virtue, but as a curious defect. Doesn't he want to be someone? One of them had mused aloud in the changing room, loud enough for the echoes to carry. You gotta make noise to get noticed in this game, mate. Otherwise, you're just part of the scenery. Their talk was often of big contracts they hadn't yet earned, of fame they hadn't yet tasted, their aspirations fueled by highlight reels and social media bravado. They'd see him reading a book on the bus to away games while they dissected the latest celebrity footballer's lifestyle. They'd see him opt for water while they debated the merits of sugary energy drinks. These small deviations from their perceived norm became fodder for their amusement, their judgments. His boots, though perfectly functional and well cared for, weren't the latest neon-streaked models. His kit, always clean, lacked the personalized embroidery some flaunted. To them, these were not signs of unpretentiousness, but of a lack of aspiration, a lack of edge. They mistook his composure for indifference, his thoughtfulness for timidity. The coach, a well-meaning man overwhelmed by a squad of burgeoning egos, often missed these subtle undercurrents, focused as he was on drills and tactics, on molding raw talent into a cohesive, winning unit. He saw a quiet, reliable player, and perhaps didn't look much deeper, attributing the locker room dynamics to the typical jostling of adolescent peacocks. The quiet boy, in turn, never complained. He simply absorbed the snipes and the sidelong glances, letting them slide past or perhaps letting them fuel a colder, more precise fire within. He played his game his way, a silent conversation with the ball, a testament to a different kind of ambition, one that whispered rather than shouted. The friction, once a low hum, began to sharpen, to grate. It wasn't open warfare, not yet, but a campaign of 1,000 paper cuts. During a passing drill, a ball deliberately fizzed too hard at his shins, followed by a faux apology. "Oh, sorry, mate. Thought you were ready for a bit of pace. Guess not." Laughter rippled from the usual small group. He merely retrieved the ball, his expression unreadable, and sent a perfectly weighted pass back. The precision of his return almost seemed to annoy them more than any verbal retort could have. Then came the incident with the water bottles. They were lined up on a bench during a break, the sun beating down. When he reached for his, the self-appointed captain of confidence snatched it away, took a large swig, and tossed it back half-empty.
"Tiersti, Kvietman?"
Gotta be quicker than that. This time, a flicker of something crossed the quiet boy's face, a tightening of the jaw, a brief, intense focus in his eyes that met the other boy's challenging gaze for a split second before he turned away, opting to wait for the communal water carrier. The aggressor seemed disappointed by the lack of a more explosive reaction, as if his power was only validated by visible distress. The mockery began to take on a pseudo-philosophical tone, their teenage pronouncements delivered with the unshakable certainty of newfound wisdom. "You know," one of them pontificated, leaning back against the goalpost after practice, "talent isn't enough. You need that killer instinct. You need to want it more than the other guy. You need to show it. You're too nice. Nice guys finish last, everyone knows that." Another chimed in, "Yeah, man, you gotta have a bit of an ego, a bit of flash. How's anyone gonna sign you if you play like you're trying to be invisible?" His silence in the face of these pronouncements was misinterpreted as agreement, or worse, as proof of their assessment. He'd listen, sometimes with a mild curiosity, as if studying a particularly noisy species of insect. What they didn't see was the meticulous way he logged their words, not as insults to be avenged, but as data points about human nature, about the game beyond the pitch. His resilience wasn't passive. It was observational, analytical. During one particularly grueling practice match, played under a persistent drizzle that turned the field into a slick mud bath, he was repeatedly targeted. Late tackles came in, shirt tugging when uncalled, and verbal jabs flew under the cover of the game's general roar. "Can't handle the pressure? Can you?" one opponent hissed after a clumsy challenge left him momentarily winded. Yet, through it all, his game seemed to clarify, to sharpen. Denied space, he found new ways to create it. Pressured, he released the ball quicker, his vision seemingly expanding to anticipate the next wave of harassment. He scored a goal that day, a low, driven shot from an improbable angle that silenced the field for a beat. There was no elaborate celebration, just a raised hand in acknowledgement to a teammate who'd provided the assist, and then back to the center circle. This quiet triumph, this refusal to be goaded into their style of theatrical confrontation, seemed to infuriate his main tormentor even more. After the match, mud-caked and weary, the captain of confidence cornered him by the kit bags. "That was a lucky shot. Don't think you're something special. One goal doesn't make a player." His voice was low, menacing. The quiet boy finally spoke, his voice even, devoid of malice but carrying an unexpected weight. "I don't think I'm special. I just play football." He then picked up his bag and walked away, leaving the other boy fuming, an unexploded firework of frustration. The coach, toweling his face nearby, had caught the tail end of the exchange, frowning slightly. "All right, lads, pack it in. Save the rivalry for the official games." A well-intentioned but ultimately inadequate intervention. The quiet boy knew this wasn't just rivalry. It was something else, something about his very way of being that they found intolerable, a mirror reflecting their own insecurities perhaps, though they would never admit it. The pressure was building not just on the field, but within the soul of the team. It was a Saturday brighter than most, the kind of day that made the green of the pitch seem almost luminous. The club had organized a small, informal gathering, a family fun day. They called it a chance for parents to see the boys train, followed by a casual barbecue. Most parents were local, familiar faces. The usual preteen awkwardness hung in the air as the boys tried to look nonchalant under the watchful eyes of their families. The captain of confidence was in his element, performing with extra zest. His laughter a little louder, his instructions to teammates a little more commanding when the coach's back was turned. He even offered the quiet boy a patronizing pat on the back after a decent pass, a gesture clearly for the parental audience. Then, a sleek, dark car, unostentatious but undeniably expensive, pulled quietly into the gravel car park at the edge of the fields. It parked without fanfare, away from the other more modest vehicles. Few noticed its arrival initially, engrossed as they were in the on-field activities or the sizzle of sausages. From the driver's side, a figure emerged. Tall, athletic, dressed in casual but impeccable training gear, sunglasses shielding his eyes. He moved with an unconscious grace, an aura of quiet command that drew the eye without demanding attention. He scanned the scene for a moment, a small, almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips as he spotted the practice game in progress. He walked towards the low fence separating the spectators from the pitch, not with the swagger of a celebrity, but with the unassuming air of any other parent. Yet heads began to turn. A murmur started, a ripple of disbelief that spread through the assembled parents and then, more slowly, to the boys on the field whose attention was intermittently drawn sideline. The coach, mid-sentence, paused, his eyes widening slightly. The captain of confidence, attempting a complicated step over near the sideline, faltered, his eyes fixing on the newcomer. He'd seen that face countless times on television, on magazine covers, on posters adorning millions of bedroom walls. But here, now, the quiet boy, having just made a simple, effective clearance, trotted towards the sideline for a swig of water, oblivious for a moment to the shift in atmosphere. The man by the fence caught his eye and offered a small, almost private nod of encouragement. The quiet boy smiled back, a genuine, unguarded smile that transformed his usually stoic face. One of the louder teammates, utterly starstruck, stammered, pointing a shaky finger. Is that who I think it is?" The quiet boy took a breath. Then, in a voice no louder than usual but suddenly amplified by the stunned silence that had fallen over his teammates, he replied, "Yeah, that's my dad." The sunglasses came off. There was no mistaking him. Cristiano Ronaldo stood there, a father watching his son play football, and in that instant, the entire dynamic of the small, unassuming training ground tilted on its axis. The captain of confidence looked as if he'd been struck by lightning, his mouth agape, his earlier arrogance visibly deflating like a punctured ball. The misjudgment, the casual cruelty, the countless condescending remarks, all of it seemed to hang, stark and humiliating, in the suddenly charged air. The initial shockwave rippled through the team, rendering them speechless. The training session, moments before a hive of youthful energy and competition, ground to an awkward, self-conscious halt. Cristiano didn't stride onto the pitch to interrupt. He simply observed, his gaze thoughtful, taking in not just the skills on display, but the interactions, the subtle power plays he'd likely heard about. He exchanged a few quiet words with the coach, a respectful murmur that didn't carry to the boys, but the coach's expression shifted, a dawning understanding mixed with a touch of awe. After a few more minutes of painfully stilted play, the coach blew his whistle, calling the boys in. "All right, lads, gather round. We have a special guest today, as some of you have noticed." The attempt at nonchalance was endearing. Cristiano stepped forward, not into the center of the huddle, but remaining slightly on its periphery, a gesture of respect for the coach's authority. He offered a general smile, one that reached his eyes, instantly putting some of the more starstruck boys slightly at ease, while simultaneously increasing the discomfort of those who had reasons to feel uneasy. "It's good to see so much passion for the game," he began, his voice calm, accented, carrying an undeniable authority that had nothing to do with volume. Football is a beautiful sport. It teaches you many things, not just how to kick a ball. His eyes scanned the young faces, lingering for a fraction of a second longer on the captain of confidence, who suddenly found the grass at his feet intensely interesting. It teaches you about discipline, he continued, about working hard when no one is watching. It teaches you about teamwork, that you are stronger together than you are alone. And it teaches you about respect. Respect for your teammates, for your opponents, for the coaches, for the game itself. And, he paused, letting the word hang in the air. Respect for yourselves. He then looked towards his son, a brief, warm glance. Sometimes the strongest players are not the loudest. Sometimes the greatest talent is found in the quietest spirit. True strength is not about how much noise you make or how you celebrate a goal. It's about how you carry yourself, especially when things are difficult. It's about resilience, about getting up after you've been knocked down, about treating others with dignity, even when they don't always show it to you. The air was thick with unspoken admissions. The captain of confidence shifted his weight. His face flushed. One of his usual acolytes nudged him, a silent, nervous gesture. Cristiano's tone remained gentle, almost paternal, yet every word landed with the precision of a perfectly placed shot. I've watched my son play. I've seen his dedication. He doesn't always choose the easy path. He works, he listens, he learns. He understands that character is built in the quiet moments, in the struggles, not just in the victories. He then turned his gaze more generally to the group. In every team, you will find different personalities. Some are vocal, some are reserved. Both have value. But what truly matters is the heart you bring to the game and the decency you show to those around you. Talent can take you far, but character will take you further. Remember that. He didn't point fingers. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The lesson was delivered with a surgical kindness, exposing the pettiness of their earlier actions without resorting to accusation. The captain of confidence finally looked up, his eyes meeting Cristiano's briefly. There was no anger in the superstar's gaze, only a profound, knowing disappointment that was somehow more devastating than any tirade. The boy's bravado had completely evaporated, replaced by a raw, visible shame. He swallowed hard, his carefully constructed facade crumbling around him. He wanted the ground to open up. Another boy, one who had often joined in the mockery, mumbled, We're sorry, sir, about everything.
Cristiano nodded slowly.
Apology is a good start, but what matters more is what you do next. How you learn from this, how you choose to treat each other from this day forward. He then offered a small, encouraging smile to the entire group. Now, I think your coach has some drills for you. Enjoy the game. Play with heart. With that, he stepped back, allowing the coach to resume, the power of his quiet words reverberating across the field, more impactful than any shouted instruction. The emotional reckoning was complete. The hard shell of youthful arrogance had been irrevocably cracked. The rest of the family fun day proceeded in a muted, almost surreal atmosphere. The boys went through their drills, but the usual boisterous chatter was absent. Glances were exchanged, nervous, thoughtful, apologetic. The captain of confidence moved like a ghost of his former self, his movements hesitant, his usual flashy plays replaced by simple, direct passes. He fumbled a ball at one point and, instead of his customary exasperated outburst, he merely grimaced, picked it up, and continued, avoiding eye contact with everyone. Cristiano remained on the sidelines, chatting easily with other parents, occasionally offering an encouraging shout to the team as a whole, or a specific word of praise for a good play, regardless of who made it. He even spent a few minutes talking to his son, not in hushed tones of commiseration or triumph, but with the easy warmth of a father proud of his child, discussing a shared passion. The quiet boy seemed lighter, the subtle tension he often carried around his shoulders visibly eased, though he offered no overt sign of vindication. He simply played his game, perhaps with a touch more freedom, a touch more visible joy. As the event wound down and families began to pack up, the smell of barbecue smoke mingling with the scent of cut grass. The weight of the afternoon's revelations settled more deeply. The coach, looking pensive, made a point of speaking to several of the boys individually, his tone more earnest than usual. He clapped the quiet boy on the shoulder. "You've got a good head on your shoulders, son, and a hell of a supporter." A small smile was exchanged. Later, as the quiet boy was gathering his things, the captain of confidence approached him, alone this time. The swagger was gone, replaced by an awkward shuffling of feet. He stood there for a moment, struggling for words, his face still tinged with embarrassment. "Look," he began, his voice barely above a whisper. I was a real idiot." He couldn't quite meet the quiet boy's eyes. "What your dad said. He was right. I've been, well, you know." He gestured vaguely, unable to articulate the full extent of his previous behavior. "Sorry for everything." The quiet boy looked at him, his expression calm, thoughtful. There was no triumph in his gaze, no hint of "I told you so." He simply nodded. Okay. The captain of confidence looked up, surprised by the simplicity of the response. "Yeah, okay." A small pause. "We all make mistakes." The straightforward acceptance seemed to disarm the other boy completely. He visibly relaxed, a fraction of the immense pressure lifting from him. "Thanks," he mumbled. Then, after another awkward pause, "You played well today." It was a small offering, but genuine. The quiet boy offered a slight smile in return. "You too." The interaction was brief, unidramatic, yet it marked a significant shift. The first cracks in the wall of arrogance were giving way to the foundations of something new. As the sun began to dip lower, casting long shadows across the emptying field, the lessons of the day, spoken and unspoken, began their slow work of reshaping not just perceptions, but character. The silence on the car ride home for many of those boys was filled with a new kind of thinking, a dawning awareness that the game and life was about more than just being the loudest one on the field. In the weeks that followed, the atmosphere within the team underwent a subtle but profound transformation. The change wasn't instantaneous or overtly dramatic, but it was undeniable. The casual cruelty that had once punctuated their practices diminished, replaced by a more focused, if sometimes still awkward, camaraderie. The captain of confidence, in particular, seemed to be navigating a new, unfamiliar terrain of humility. He was quieter, more observant. His on-field celebrations became less about personal aggrandizement and more about acknowledging the team. He even started passing the ball more, looking for the best option rather than always trying for the spectacular individual effort. There were small gestures. One afternoon, when the quiet boy's shoelace snapped mid-drill, the captain of confidence, without a word, tossed him his spare laces from his bag. It was a minor act, almost inconsequential, yet it spoke volumes in the new language of the team. Other teammates, those who had once been quick to join in the mockery, now found themselves offering words of encouragement, or simply including the quiet boy in conversations without the previous undercurrent of condescension. The quiet boy, for his part, remained unchanged in his demeanor. He was still reserved, still dedicated, still humble. He accepted the shift in his teammates' behavior with a quiet grace, never once alluding to the past or the reason for their altered conduct. He didn't need to. His consistency, his unwavering character, had become a silent touchstone for them. He continued to let his playing do the talking, but now more people were willing to listen to its nuanced language. One afternoon, after a particularly tough training session, the captain of confidence found himself walking off the pitch alongside the quiet boy. There was a comfortable silence between them for a few moments before he spoke, his voice low and sincere. "You know," he said, glancing at his teammate, "I used to think being quiet meant you weren't ambitious or tough enough." He paused, then added, "I was wrong. Your dad, he didn't just talk about respect and character. He kind of lives it, doesn't he? Even when he's, him." The quiet boy considered this. "He always says talent is a gift, but character is a choice." "Yeah," the other boy mused, kicking at a loose pebble. "I'm starting to get that." He offered a small, genuine smile. "Thanks for not holding it against me." The quiet boy simply nodded, an unspoken understanding passing between them. The lesson imparted that Saturday afternoon had not been a fleeting moment of celebrity awe. It had planted seeds. Seeds of introspection, of empathy, of the understanding that true strength isn't measured in decibels or displays of dominance, but in the quiet fortitude of spirit, in kindness, in the courage to admit when you're wrong and strive to be better. The father's fame had opened the door, but it was the sincerity of his words and the quiet dignity of his son that had walked through it, leaving an indelible mark on a group of young hearts and minds. The team wasn't perfect, and the journey of growth was ongoing, but something fundamental had shifted. They were learning that the most valuable players, both on and off the field, were often those who understood the power of humility, the strength in quiet contribution, and the enduring truth that a little kindness can change the game entirely. And in the quiet resilience of one boy, they had found an unexpected teacher, and in his father, a reminder that greatness and graciousness could, and should, walk hand in hand.